The Leaf is an amazing vehicle. It's starting its 10th winter with us, and its battery has not noticeably degraded.
The practical issues around EVs and the political issues around EVs are very much intersected. Right?
It would be nice to have more level 3 chargers around the province for those of us who don't have Teslas.
So in an urban environment, an EV is not the best way to get around. Walk, take a bike, take public transportation.
Obviously, in rural areas, cycling and public transportation have its challenges. So we're all have unique challenges, and I think there is really a role for EVs.
Today's Climate Forum. It's about e-vehicles, plugging them in, and we have Tom Rice and Roger Martin. They're both very passionate about e-vehicles, sustainability, decarbonizing, and so on, and we'll talk more about it, and you will hear it from them. So, Lee.
Yep, my name is Lee. My family and I are settlers here in the traditional territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. Welcome everyone to Climate Forum on a third Thursday, a blustery night. Joachim and I we're meeting here on traditional land, and even though we're all meeting virtually, we're all standing on traditional land, and in most cases on stolen land. I would like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Nation. These are the people of the Three Fires, known as the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi nations. And I would like to also give thanks to the Chippewa Saugeen and the Chippewa Nawash Unceded First Nation, now together known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. And personally, I'm growing more aware of inequality in North America between our Indigenous neighbors and ourselves, and about the systemic racism that still exists. We here at Climate Forum, we respect you and your connection to nature.
So the Climate Forum is a forum that connects with people in Grey and Bruce County and beyond. And it's an exciting forum where we can talk about local issues and global issues and how they connect. And one question that comes up a lot is e-vehicles, EVs, and lots of questions around them, how efficient they really are, how we can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions through EVs. Also living in Grey and Bruce County, how practical it is. There are lots of questions around them. And so the way we came to this evening's topic is that Tom Rice and I, we sometimes meet at the market and chat about EVs, and that has been going on kind of here and there for quite a long time. And Tom is very passionate about EVs. He has driven them since a long time, since 20 years. So that gives him quite a bit of experience in how it works in this area here. And Tom is not only kind of driving EVs, he's also doing all kinds of stuff that has to do with reducing greenhouse gas emissions. For instance, he had a heat air pump already in 1975. And he told us that he pulled out his investments of oil and gas and fossil fuels. So he's really trying to be consequent and consistent around greenhouse gas emissions reductions. Okay, Tom, it's yours now. Thanks for being here.
Okay. Thank you, Joachim. Julie and I have lived in Georgian Bluffs since 1975, and you can see from my green CV that I've been involved with we've been involved with trying to reduce our energy consumption and also lower our carbon footprint over the years, and we're continuing to do that. This program is about vehicles, so I'm going to focus first on in 2004, Julie and I purchased a Prius hybrid. That was one of the earlier hybrid cars. There weren't any pure EVs back then. So we drove our Prius for many, many years. I know some of the people in the audience have a Prius, and we just loved the way it showed on the screen the battery and the electrons going back and forth when they were needed or when the gas came on. And it also showed us when we were doing regenerative braking and how that fed back into the battery. So we really enjoyed that. Now the Prius got older and older, and it was time to move on. So we actually passed the Prius on to my daughter in Toronto, and we went shopping, and we decided on a Nissan Leaf. That was back in the fall of 2012. We did look into a plug-in Prius at the time, but it only got 30 kilometers on electric, and the rest of the time the gas engine went. So that didn't make us too happy about that, and we thought maybe it wasn't that economical. So we invested in the Nissan Leaf. So the Nissan Leaf has a range that when we bought it of 130 to 140. Nowadays, the Leaf has either 240 or 340. So, but this was one of the original Leafs. And you could tell I'm a Leaf fan. Anyway, we purchased the Leaf and we drove it for a number of years, and we really, really enjoyed it. It really performed well, and we were able to charge it up in our carport, and we were very, very happy with it. We did go on some longer trips to Toronto or to Prince Edward County to visit my my daughter and grandchildren. And we had to drive our gas car on those trips. So that kind of concerned us, and we were so happy with the Leaf. We thought, well, maybe we can investigate getting a long range EV. At that time in 2014, there weren't very many the only long range available was the Tesla Model S. The X wasn't even out yet, I don't think, back then, but it was very, very expensive. So we shopped around and looked online, and we found that there was a used model that we could invest in. So we did that back in 2014. The Model S that we got was a rear wheel drive, and it had a range of 400 kilometers. And we were very, very happy with it. But as technology improved and the EVs improved, we wanted to get more range, and EVs became available in all-wheel drive. So I put an order in for a Tesla Model Y about a year and a half ago. It has a range of 500 kilometers. So it can go a little bit farther, and it's got more up-to-date technology in it as well. Next slide, please. So with our two current cars, the Leaf and the Model Y, we have plenty of range for local errands. But however, if we do a local errand together, we often will use the Leaf because it's actually a lighter vehicle and it's more energy efficient. It probably uses less electrons to go to town and back. We have the two chargers in my garage. We have a 240 volt level 2 charger, it's called, and we have a 110, 120 outlet. That's a level 1 charger as well. So we can be charging both cars at the same time. The level 2 charges at about 40 kilometers an hour, and the level 1 is 7 kilometers an hour. So overnight charging is plenty, all we need for our local errands around Grey and Bruce. And when I can, I'm able to charge my cars from the solar panels on my roof. A number of years back, I invested in a net metering, a 10 kilowatt net metering project on my roof. So if the sun is shining, I plug my cars in to make sure I'm getting some electrons directly from the sun. So this is a photo of my my Nissan level 2 charger. It was available from Nissan when I bought the car, and I got a little bit of a rebate on it. Level 2 chargers cost about $1,000 to maybe up to $1,500, but no more than that to put in. That includes the cost of having it an electrician put in a 240 line and having it CSA approved. This is a level 2 charger that's at the city hall or at the farmers market. The city installed this, and it's a level 2. And at the current time, it's free. They're doing a pilot project just to see how much it's used. But anybody can go and that has an EV can go and plug in and then go to a coffee shop, or they can go and do some shopping in the main street. Or if they're at the market, they can go to the market. What it's like to drive an EV in Grey County in the winter. Well, we haven't really had any major problems. We think it's just great. If you ask the Norwegians, they don't have any problems. Norway has the highest uptake of any country in the world of electric vehicles. And they're actually colder than we are. And they have almost as much snow, and they have lots of hills and mountains. The first thing we do before every winter is we put snow tires on our EVs. We put 4 snow tires in. And then during the winter time, we keep our cars plugged in. And this keeps the battery warm. And also in the morning, 15 minutes or so before we leave, we have apps for our cars, and we can communicate with our cars and turn the heating on while they are plugged in. So we'll warm up the car without it using any of the battery range. And the cars also have heated seats and steering wheels. So it's really quite comfy. And unless the windshield fogs up when we go into town, we don't really need to put the heat on just for going in and out of town. The cars, all EVs have a low center of gravity because of the battery is like a skateboard in the bottom of the car. They have also excellent software traction control, as most cars have nowadays. And together it makes for great handling in winter conditions. And the Tesla actually is a smart enough car that if it's really, really cold and slippery, it will reduce the regenerative braking so that you don't go into a skid. And in the really, really cold days, there is a decrease in the range that you get in an EV. It can be up to 30 or 40% if the temperature is -20 or -30. This doesn't affect us for local trips, but more so for traveling. So basically in the wintertime, we've got plenty of range for driving around here. And then obviously if we go on a trip, then we have to adjust our itinerary so that we don't, the battery doesn't go down too soon. The Leaf is an amazing vehicle. It's starting its 10th winter with us, and its battery has not noticeably degraded. When we bought the car, it had between 130 to 140 kilometers of range. And the other day, I had it plugged in overnight and turned on the app, and the range was up to 144. So that's 10 years. So the batteries last a lot longer than anybody ever thought they would. And if you take care of them and do a lot of your charging from level 1 and level 2, they will last a long, long time and not degrade. This is a photo of 3 EVs at my house. The one on the left is my Leaf. The one on the right is Tesla Model Y, and the one in the middle is the Chevy Bolt that belongs to my daughter. Roger, who's speaking after, also has a Chevy Bolt, and oddly enough, it's the same color. And last Saturday, at one point or another, we charged 4 different EVs, but only 2 at a time because we only have 2 outlets. You'll notice the solar panels on the roof are covered with snow, so we certainly didn't get any help from the sunshine that day. Now we've taken a lot of long trips in our EVs and haven't had any issues. Toronto is probably one of the shortest long trips that we take, and we often go there and back in one day. So if we're charged up at home, when we leave, we can go to Toronto and then we make it back. There's a DC fast charger in Orangeville now. So we go in there for 10 or 15 minutes and charge up a bit more. And then on the way home, we often visit Highland or Grounds, the coffee place. Sean did a great presentation last month about, about environmental benefits and what he does. So we basically, we make quite a few trips to Prince Edward County to visit the grandchildren. And when we go there, we leave with a full battery. I was going to say tank, but it's a full battery. And then we often will charge, or most often in Port Hope, and top up. And then when we get to my daughter's house, she had a 240 volt outlet installed in her garage. So we plug into there, and 2 or 3 days later, when we leave, we have a full battery to start back. And then we often will stop somewhere along the way. It's a 5-hour drive, so everybody in any car is going to have to stop and have a break. We've also made long trips to PEI, New York City, and we went to Los Angeles and back to go to a wedding. So that was pretty exciting. And very fuel efficient trip. So we use the car's navigation system for these longer trips. And one of the things the system does is it finds the level 3 DC chargers that we'll need so that we can get there without running out of juice. And we charge, if on the really long trips, if we're staying at a hotel, we'll charge overnight. A lot of hotels have level 2 chargers now, and some have 110 outlets that we can use. During the day, if we're doing a lot of driving, we will stop 2 or 3 other times during the day, just for bathroom breaks and coffee, or we might, have lunch or do some sightseeing. As far as DC fast chargers, Tesla has the fastest ones. They're called superchargers. They're as much as 1,400 kilometers an hour to start. So your car really starts to hum. It only takes about 15 or 20 minutes to get the battery from 10 to 80%. Tesla intends in the future, they pledged that they're going to make their superchargers available for all types of EVs. A lot of the other DC chargers are excellent, and they can be found in the apps, but they do tend to be slower than the superchargers. And an example of hotels in Owen Sound, the Best Western Inn that has had a level 2 charger for quite a long time, and this one is for free. So if you go in to a meeting or for a meal, or we don't usually stay there overnight because it's in Owen Sound, but anyway, it's a good charger. The Comfort Inn at the top of at 9th Street and 10th Avenue East has 2 level 3 chargers, and payment is required. So this is a photo. The one on the left is a screenshot of my daughter's phone, and it's got a number of the EV charging companies that own these chargers. It's also got the PlugShare app. And on the right is her Chevy Bolt charging up at a charge point charger in the basement of a hotel or garage or shopping center. I think I think Martha went to do her grocery shopping that day. Anyway, you could see that is a DC fast charger that she's got in her car. These are 2 chargers that we came across when we went out west to Los Angeles. And you can see the one on the right has a roof over it, and there's solar panels on there. So there's solar panels to charge up the big battery bank that in turn helps charge up the car. And this is the only time we had to wait on our whole trip. you could see the lineup of cars waiting to charge. And what happened, it was at a Saturday, and there was a big shopping mall, and people had plugged in, and even though their car was full, they'd continued to shop, and they hadn't come back and moved their cars. So all the parking stalls, all charging stalls were plugged full. This doesn't happen anymore because Tesla recognized this as a problem, and they started charging idling fees, and they would send an alarm to people on their cell phone to tell them that to move their car or they're going to get penalized for it. So we've never had that happen ever since. This is a level 2 charging station we came across when we were visiting a winery, and you can see by the sign it was powered by solar. So that's kind of interesting. That's another example. So what I like about my EVs, first of all, you can tell I'm pretty enthusiastic. The EVs are clean. There's radically lower GHG emissions, which Roger will expand on. I like it. You know, I can charge for my solar panels. Not everybody's going to be able to do that, but it kind of is an extra reason that I like it. They have low fuel cost. I've indicated about 25%, but I think that's if you go to a charger or you do it during expensive time. If you do it during cheap time, it's even less than 25%. And there's no smelly gas station stops. They also have low maintenance cost. The brakes last a long, long time, much longer than in a gas car, because you're not braking against an engine. And when you take your foot off the accelerator, the motors that run the electric cars will stop almost right away. So I sometimes drive home and get to my house without having touched the brakes if you time your accelerator release at the right time. In summary, the cars are fantastic to drive. They're quiet. They're wonderfully handling, including acceleration to pass when needed. And that's even on a hill. They have tremendous amount of torque. So you don't have to worry. They're not like a golf cart. So as part of my preparation for this, I went around to all the dealers in Owen Sound, all the car dealers. There's 12 altogether. And I had a set of survey questions to ask them to see what they knew about EVs and whether they sold any and whether they had chargers or anything like that. So I'm not going to expand on that right now, but the summary of these results will be available to anybody who's interested. What I can say about all the vehicles is, because of the supply chain issues, there's not a lot of vehicles right now that for test driving. So it's not a good time to be doing that. However, there's an organization in Toronto, EVNet, and they have a plug and drive center where you can go down and test drive a number of different types of EVs. The plug and drive people, and they also help you if you want to buy a used EV. A used EV makes them a little more affordable, and the batteries we know last a long, long time. So
those of you already looking into electric vehicles, you know well the reason that we are looking at EVs at all. Why do so many countries around the world even care about EVs? And this is the main reason. This slide kind of tells an important story, which is that transportation is the largest emitting sector. Definitely in Ontario, it's the largest, and in many provinces across Canada, it's number 1 or number 2, and in most countries actually around the world, it's number 1 or number 2. So the point being that you really can't tackle your climate change goals as a country or a city. You really can't hit those goals if you don't tackle transportation. And of course, electric vehicles are a really great opportunity to reduce emissions from transportation, especially in jurisdictions that have relatively clean electricity, or what we call a low emitting grid. And of course, here in Ontario, we have a very low emitting grid. We have a grid that's based primarily on nuclear and hydroelectric power, and then a little bit of renewables and a little bit of natural gas. Interestingly, in Ontario, we used to have a lot of coal on the grid, and as we shut down that coal, of course, our grid became even cleaner, and especially at night. If you think about fossil fuel electricity, it tends to run at the peak time when it's the last on and first off. It's when we really need peaking capability in the province. So for example, at the peak of the day when all the buildings are running, you would run natural gas, or we used to run coal at that time. And so at night, when we tend to have everything shut off, so we don't have a huge demand for electricity, it's almost all nuclear, hydro, and a little bit of wind. So it's a very low GHG emitting grid at night. And that's what makes EVs such a good match for Ontario's grid, because most of the time people are going to plug in their vehicles when they're at home at night. And so you're going to plug into that clean electricity at night. And also, not only are you going to take a huge bite out of the emissions of transportation, but you're also actually doing your province an economic favor, because typically we have this surplus of electricity on the grid at night when everything is turned off. We really can't store much electricity here in Ontario, so we tend to dump it. We dump it into New York State and into Quebec at a loss most every night. And so if we can get more and more people to plug in electric cars at night, we're actually not only dropping the emissions significantly, but you're also actually buying electricity that was otherwise being dumped or sold at a negative price. So it's a winner both for the environment and the economy. And it's a winner not just for the provincial economy, but for your own economy, because of course EVs are much cheaper to run than gas. And the main reason for that is that the fuel or the electricity is much cheaper than gas, even at these crazy low gas prices we're seeing now, which I think most of us would agree probably won't last. Those prices are still for electricity much, much less than gas. And so great opportunity for you not only to reduce your emissions, but also save money. The other reason you save money is because of maintenance. Maintenance in an electric car is much, much less. And the reason for that is EVs have very few moving parts. So you have a situation where there are something in the order of 20 to 30 moving parts in an electric car, and something in the area of 1,800 to 2,000 moving parts in a gas car. So of course, a lot more things to break, and so a lot more repairs. And so for those reasons, electric cars save you money. The other point we're trying to make on this side is that EVs go the distance. You can see that most EVs on the market now can get as much as even 400, 500 kilometers per charge. And so you have certainly a lot less concerns around range and around your ability, how frequently you might need to plug them in. Most Canadians are actually only plugging their car in once or twice a week, because most of us only drive about 30 to 50 kilometers a day. So for all these reasons, it's very convenient and not what a lot of people imagine as sort of some kind of hassle to plug in your car. An added benefit that I've noticed during this COVID-19 is that I plug my car in at home, so I never have to go to a gas station. I don't have to touch something that other people are touching. I'm just using my home station, and it's only me and my family that use it. So another plus that actually I never considered. Of course, we've already talked about the emission reduction, which is really incredible, at least 90% here in Ontario. That would be the case in British Columbia, in Quebec, in Manitoba, where they have also very low emitting grids. And even in places like Alberta and Saskatchewan, where we do have some coal running on the grid, you still get about a 20 to 30% emission reduction in those provinces. And the reason is because their grid isn't 100% fossil fuel, it's just partially fossil fuel. And the other reason is a large coal plant tends to still be more efficient than a small internal combustion engine. And finally, the last benefit I want to talk about is the makes and models that are available. Certainly, most people have heard of Tesla, and Tesla gets a lot of media attention, but that has also led people to think that electric cars are really expensive, and always want to remind people, and you folks who are looking at used already know that EVs come in all shapes and sizes. There are lots of makes and models available. Even on the new market, there's more than 40 different makes and models available, growing exponentially. In fact, in 18 months to 2 years, we'll see upwards of 100 different makes and models on the market at that time. So really exciting time to be looking at electric vehicles. And just for 2 minutes on Plug and Drive and who we are, you've found us for this seminar, so you probably know a little bit about us. I will not spend a lot of time. This is us in front of our EV Discovery Center in the Greater Toronto Area. If you happen to live near or you're making a trip to Toronto, please do visit us at the EV Discovery Center. Of course, we're closed right now, but we hope to be open again soon, and we will create an environment where physical distancing is possible, and we still want to get you in for test drives if possible. So this center has been a real hit with the general public. The idea of it is to allow people to test drive all the makes and models of EV in a no pressure, no sales environment. And we've been really, really happy with the turnout we've had to the EVDC, about 20,000 visitors a year. And of course, our main focus has been education, but we work on a number of files. We help with some policy work, we do some research, but I would say 70 to 80% of what we do is outreach, which is to help consumers, doing everything from in-person presentations, test drives, both on the road and at our center, and really just helping the consumer get all the information they need to make the switch. So that's our big focus. And we love to partner with different organizations that are going to help us do that. So even in these difficult times, we're trying to continue to talk to people about the benefits of EV, and we really do believe strongly that when we do open up, it should be a green recovery. So we're so excited that so many of you are looking at used EV as your next vehicle, and you'll be a big contributor to that change, because once people switch to EVs, they almost never, ever, ever switch back. There's so many benefits and enjoyment even just of driving that most people stick with it. Okay. So we're going to spend the rest of this time talking about used EVs and why they make sense for so many vehicle buyers. We did a survey of both EV owners and gas car owners in the Greater Toronto Area. We talked to about 200 EV owners and about 1,000 gas car owners. And we asked them what was their motivation to buy. So the EV owners said, the highest percentage of people said that the reason they chose their EV was for the environmental benefit. Interestingly, when we asked gas car owners why they did not choose an EV, they said by a wide margin that it was that the EV was too expensive. We expected them to say, oh, it's because they don't get enough range. But that was well down the list, something like, it was the next item that people chose, but it was something like 12-13%. So really, too expensive was a huge, huge factor in people's decision. And again, this was a few years ago now, 2017, when we did this survey. But I think this would hold true today. I think people still believe EVs are too expensive, mostly because they haven't thought of buying used. And again, they don't know all the makes and models. So I think a lot of it is based on misinformation, but there is, of course, always a grain of truth to what people believe. And there are some very expensive EVs. And of course, the first EVs were more expensive than the equivalent gas car. So it's understandable that people have that impression. But you know, now that used EVs have become more and more available on the market, it's an exciting time to look at a used EV as an option. And now we're going to talk a little bit about choosing the right EV for you. And we're talking about both fully electric EVs and plug-in hybrids. We have some just basic information, rule of thumb for figuring out which type of vehicle might make the most sense for you. So you have to consider your driving range and your typical. And when I talk about this, I'm talking about your typical driving that you're doing most days, not to pick the one time or 2 times a year that you take a long trip. So if 98% of the time you're driving less than 100 kilometers a day, you're doing a back and forth commute, Or for example, you're a 2-car family and you have another gas vehicle, those are good reasons to choose a fully electric vehicle, because your range is going to fall in the range of any EV, full EV on the market. And you have that other gas car, let's say you do want to take a long trip somewhere. So those are good reasons to choose a fully electric. Also, people tend to choose fully electric if they have access to an outlet, whether that means you have your own home plug or you have a nearby public plug that you can use regularly. Those are good reasons, again, to consider full electric. And of course, you save more money with full electric than you do with a plug-in hybrid, because you just have only the electric to deal with and you don't have also all the parts that come along with gas. So for those reasons, it might make sense, if these are sort of fit your life, that you would choose a fully electric vehicle as opposed to a plug-in hybrid. On the other hand, a plug-in hybrid might make sense for you depending on your lifestyle. Now, we're always very supportive of people who want to make a move in the electric direction, but they can't quite get their mind around a full electric. So if you're a 1-car family, for example, and it's going to be your only car and it's going to be the one that does the road trip and does the trips to grandma's house and does everything, and it's frequent enough that you're doing these trips, that you might want to consider a plug-in hybrid. Or if, for example, you have a very long commute, it might just be too nerve-wracking for you to go fully electric. A plug-in hybrid might make sense. The third reason we find people might choose a plug-in hybrid rather than a full electric is if you don't have an easy access to charging. Some people who live in a multi-unit residential building, a condo or an apartment, it's challenging at times to get your own plug. And in that case, sometimes there might be times when you can't charge at home and you might just want the comfort of having that gas backup. So these are all really good reasons to consider plug-in hybrid.
Thanks very much, Tom. That was a really wide-ranging look at EVs from your personal point of view, regionally, and also some of the technical questions you probably answered that many of us have, particular questions, I think, around range and so on. Yeah, we thought it would be the best thing to have the question and answers at the end. Roger has been really interested in getting out of fossil fuel for a long time, since the 1970s. And he's actually Tom's brother-in-law. That's part of this kind of family thing of getting off fossil fuel, which I think is really exciting, because I'm sure there are lots of discussions in your direct and kind of extended family. So Roger has a lot of experience in the technical part of electric cars. So Roger, are you ready to take it on here?
Okay, so the most important person in this picture is to the right. That's Tom's wife, Julie, and my sister, same person. She's holding one side of the sign. I'm holding the other side of the sign. I created the sign after the US election in 2016 when I just felt I had to do something. So did other people, because that was at a rally at Toronto City Hall that was protesting Trump's election on all sorts of different for all sorts of different reasons. But that kind of shows that I totally get it, that we've got to get fossil fuels ASAP, even though it seems like we've been using them. Well, we have been using them all our lifetimes, but it doesn't actually go back that far in human history. And then and I was happy to see that 350.org, Toronto 350.org, still has a picture of that sign in use, I think the summer after the 2016. So I had experience in the early 2000s, from 2000 to 2009, our company developed a fully electric delivery truck with Purelator, which was quite popular with them. We were supported by Transport Canada, from Sustainable Development Technology Canada, and Purelator wanted us to build a lot more for them, but we couldn't see doing so at a profit at that point with battery prices where they were, and several other factors. So that product hasn't been commercialized. There's still potential for commercializing it, because now batteries are much, much better, and would make that vehicle even more attractive. So because of that, I was involved. I was a founding board member of Electric Mobility Canada, and I was involved in the 2009 electric mobility, what was it, roadmap, which was done with Anaracan. I was involved in that publication, and some of the thinking from that, my contribution to that publication is in these slides. 2017, I finally, after having a couple of hybrids, first a Toyota Prius in 2000, and then a plug-in Chevy Volt in 2012. I was delighted to get my first BEV in 2017. So that's a picture of me beside it in 2017. And behind that is a lot of GM trucks. And one of the reasons I got a Chevy BEV is because we did a lot of business, or do a lot of business, with General Motors. EVs and GHGs, how much difference do they really make? Well, that depends on how clean the grid is. So this is a map that was published by the National Energy Board in probably in 2018, based on 2017 data, and it shows, it's showing GHG intensity of generation measured in grams of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour. So it goes from a minimum in Quebec of 1.2 to a maximum in Alberta of 790. And of course, because this is where the energy for your EV is coming from, that makes a big difference on your GHG emission reduction with your EV, which we'll see on the next slide. Okay, so this is bar graph. Just takes that GHG content of the grid energy and translates it into GHG per kilometer versus a ICE. And we have to make assumptions on how much energy the two types of vehicles are using. We're assuming 8 liters of gasoline per 100 kilometer for the ICE and 180 watt hours per kilometer for the EV. And but you get some pretty spectacular results. In Manitoba and Quebec, you get not close to 100% reduction. I mean, rounded to the nearest percent, it's 100%. Of course, it's 99.9 and 99.6, something like that. In Ontario, for reasons that have already been stated, you get a dramatic reduction, 96%. But what happens if we plug all those EVs into the grid? This is data from last week from the Ontario Independent Electricity System Operator. It shows the peaks and valleys of daily electricity use across Ontario. And what's of interest in fueling EVs are those valleys, the troughs. So there's a valley that took place from last Monday night to Tuesday morning. It's about 8 hours long. It's about 3,000 megawatts tall. So you multiply those two together, you get 24,000 megawatt hours of energy that's available in that trough, or 24 million kilowatt hours. Cars are usually, batteries are measured in kilowatt hours. So that's enough to put an average of 10 kilowatt hours of energy into 2.4 million EVs, which would allow those EVs to go something over 50 kilometers, around 50 kilometers. So that's allowing people, and I think the average use per day in Ontario of a car is something like 35 kilometers. So approximately you can refuel 2.4 million EVs overnight. And for context, in 2017, there were 8.7 million road vehicles registered in Ontario. So you can recharge a bunch of them overnight, but not all of them. Oh, well, sorry, not all the vehicles, certainly more than all the EVs currently in Ontario, you can recharge overnight. But if we had 100% EVs, we need more energy in the grid. An important thing about EVs in the grid and a clean grid is that although they're not doing so now, EVs could potentially provide energy storage for the grid, taking energy when the grid has too much of it and donating it back when the grid doesn't have enough of it. And this is relevant, as most people on this call will know, because solar, wind, and batteries are all continuing to show dramatic decreases in costs. photovoltaics, offshore, onshore wind, and battery storage price over the past 12 years. And those are dramatic decreases, and they are preceded by dramatic decreases over the decades before that. So it now means that solar and wind are the lowest cost sources of energy, but they have a huge Achilles heel in intermittency. So that's where storage comes in. And one way to get a clean grid is to put tons of redundant solar and wind on the grid and have storage. So EVs could be an important part of that. Okay, so one legitimate question from a sustainability standpoint is embodied energy, which is the energy that it takes to make something in the first place. How do EVs stack up against ICEs and against alternative forms of transportation? This graph is from a publication, a paper done by the Union of Concerned Scientists in 2015. And with their assumptions, there's just over a 50% reduction in lifetime GHGs as going from a ICE to a BEV. Orange is the vehicle manufacture, the energy used in manufacturing the vehicle. The blue is battery manufacturing. The gray is operation of the vehicle. I note there, I added a little green dotted line because if you get a super clean grid, such as those of Quebec and Manitoba, then your lifetime reduction in GHGs is likely, with these other assumptions, is closer to 75%. And of course, I mean, one point, because we're going to come to it later, is if you clean up the manufacturing operations and get the GHGs out of those, then you can lower the embodied energy. But then that was a comparison of one type of car to another type of car. But what about cars versus other forms of transportation? And this little table is mostly, except for the green part that I put in there, is mostly from a paper done, published in Environmental Science, e-bike impacts. But the column to the right is megajoules per passenger kilometer embodied energy. So you can see that the cars don't do very well against bicycles, buses, and light rail, just because you're carrying one person, and in the case of cars, you're carrying one person with a heavy, expensive, complex machine. So that needs to be acknowledged. So end of life for EV batteries, that's a big question. Just the reduce, recycle, reuse, recycle pattern occurred to me for this. And of course, in terms of reduction, use a battery as long as possible in its first EV application. And Julie and Tom are now in their 10th year without any noticeable degradation. There's got to have been some, but not enough for them to notice. That's a big deal. I mean, it looks like they can go well into a second decade of using that car. And also in my Volt that's over 5 years old, I don't see any noticeable battery degradation. Again, it's got to be there, but it's not perceptible. Reuse. People are taking used EV batteries and using them for grid storage and making money at it, according to that article that I linked to. Basically doing arbitrage, where you store grid energy when it's cheap and sell it back to the grid when it's expensive. So that's practical and being done. And finally, recycling. Of course, batteries are very high quality ore for the next generations of batteries, and that's being done. And notably, a very talented, accomplished guy, JB Straubel, who's the former CTO of Tesla and used to appear on stage regularly with Elon Musk as a technical expert, has now started a company, Redwood Materials, that's recycling batteries and also other materials. And also the auto companies, several auto companies already have reuse and recycling programs for use EV batteries. But there's no getting around. If you're going to build a lot more batteries and a lot more cars, you're going to need virgin material, some virgin material. So certainly mining is an issue. I'm not an expert on that. I have links here to a summary piece done on Quirks and Quarks earlier this year, and also a recent piece by Amory Lovins, who is founded Rocky Mountain Institute and has been working in renewable energy, clean tech very effectively, super effectively for 4 decades. Anyway, here's a recent article of about a week ago about the fact that the market naturally migrates to less expensive, less exotic materials. So motors are increasingly not using rare earth magnets, and cobalt is getting used less and less in batteries and so on. So, okay, so health benefits from EVs, cleaner air, and it links to a couple of, particularly cleaner urban air, it links to a couple of studies that have shown that, one by the University of Toronto, the other by Harvard. Negative health effects from EVs, is this a concern? Well, you're sitting inside a steel or aluminum box on top of a battery, and so there are large DC currents that go from the battery to the motor controllers, and then the motor controllers turn that into AC, and there's large AC currents going to the motor. So there's electromagnetic fields inside the car and pretty close to you. So the general view, from what I was able to read, and there's studies to confirm that this is that there's not an issue, but there are some who are being cautious about it, saying, well, it needs to be taken seriously, and radiation needs to be, electromagnetic fields need to be minimized within EVs. A couple of links there, including to Joel Moskowitz, who's one of the people sounding a cautionary note. Okay, so one thing is that we're really seeing the tip of a huge iceberg with EVs now, because the OEMs this is car manufacturers, it's in the car manufacturers have planning horizons of a long time, you know, from planning a vehicle to producing it is many years. So they already have EVs in their pipeline now, and we'll see dramatically more EVs over the next few years. I won't go through every one of these OEMs, but of course Tesla has the largest market capitalization of all the OEMs. So the market's clearly bullish on EVs. BYD is a Chinese company, currently the second largest EV OEM. Ford is already making, or this year will be making EV versions of the largest selling van in the world, which is the Transit van. And also this year we'll be starting to make EV versions of the largest selling pickup in the truck in the world, F-150. GM's very active in EVs and has made a pledge to be totally EV by 2035, etc. Okay, this is my last slide, but here's the thing: to get off fossil fuels, electrify everything while cleaning up the grids. So electrify all the vehicles you can, and beyond vehicles, building heat, steel production, hydrogen production, etc. Right? That's how to get the reduction in GHG emissions that we need to stop the planet overheating too much.
Thanks very much, Roger. Yeah, so we'll try to open it up now to question and answers. Maybe I could start at the top. There are quite a few questions. One, for instance, was, and that could be for both of you, about how about fire and explosion risks of batteries and electric vehicles?
There's a lot of energy stored inside a battery, just as there's a lot of energy stored inside a gas tank. So batteries are dangerous, gas tanks are dangerous. Appropriate safety measures need to be taken. Emergency, and it's already the case that anyway, the emergency people, the ambulance people are already trained now in dealing with EVs and hybrids. It's a serious safety matter.
Yeah.
But it can be managed just as gasoline is managed.
We drive a Kia Soul electric, and there are two levels of batteries, and we have the smaller battery in ours. And in our garage parking spot, we have we were supplied with 220-volt plug, and we bought our own level 2 chargers. They read the meter once a year, and they just read it in November, and we did exactly 20,000 kilometers for the year, and it cost us $220, which means 1.1 penny per kilometer. So we were very happy with that. The other thing I wanted to comment on is, since it is an election year, I wrote a note to our MPP, Bill Walker, and asked him about the supply of level 3 chargers around the province. We find there are not enough of them. When we go to Peterborough, we usually go through Aurelia, and there are no level 3 chargers in Aurelia, so we have to go down to Markham and top up there. And I asked them to include my note to the Minister of Transportation, Ms. Mulroney. And I've never, I just got a comment saying, thank you for your note. And that was the end of it. So I know he's not going to give rebates for people who buy new EVs, but it would be nice to have more level 3 chargers around the province, especially for those of us who don't have Teslas. Tesla is very well supported.
The federal government, I believe, has a whole lot of money set aside, and they're going to try to expand the charging system. Unfortunately, Doug Ford, he chopped the whole of the cap and trade system and all the EV incentives and all the money for chargers. He even had some ripped out. So hopefully he can be persuaded to come back in line, or there's an election coming up. The other good news, if you live in our region, is that Grey County is collaborating with the other counties, and they're going to try to increase the chargers in the region. And they're, first of all, going to try to identify where there's gaps or there's deserts, as you could call it, where there's spaces where there isn't any chargers. So that this is a project that's just underway. And if you go on PlugShare, I'm sure you could see a whole lot of places, but there are a whole lot of chargers, but often they're just level 2 chargers. And if you look at the details of some of the level 3, they're either broken or out of commission. So certainly if Tesla does allow all cars to use the superchargers, that will help, but they're only doing a pilot project in Europe now. So I suggested, I talked to the climate director in Grey County, or I've been emailing her, and I mentioned a need for chargers along Highway 10, fast chargers. There seems to be lots along Highway 6. There's a fast charger in Mount Forest and Arthur, but in up Highway 10 seems to be a bit of a gap or a desert. So I've suggested, Orangeville, Primrose, Shelburne, Dundalk, Flesherton or Markdale. So hopefully there will be some, and the answer about the trip over to Peterborough, in that direction, hopefully there will be more. Certainly if there's a good fast charger in Collingwood, that would help, because that's on the way, and in Barrie and Aurelia. So I'm sure that they're going to be moving in that direction. It's just a matter of time.
Great, that's good to hear. Yeah, there is a level 3 charger at the Volkswagen dealership in Orangeville.
Yeah, but it's only a CCS, and there's 2 kinds of chargers. There's fast chargers. There's the CCS system, and there's the CHAdeMO. So I'm not sure if the Orangeville has both a lot of the stations have both plugs, and you can use either one.
Right.
Okay, thanks very much. So it shows that the practical issues around EVs and the political issues around EVs are very much intersected, right? So as you mentioned, there's a election coming up, and I don't want to go any further into this, but I find it interesting, Tom, that you also talked to Gray County, because they just wrote up are in the process of completing their climate action plan, where this should be part of too. So thanks very much. I have a question that came up somewhere. So how about when you're in a hotel and they don't have enough plugs for you? So when there's a competition, how do you handle that? So there's 2 plugs and 20 cars.
The ethical thing to do is your car will tell you how long it's going to take to top up. So when that time comes, it's the ethical thing to do to remove your car and let the next person have a go at it. And by the way, the people who park their gas cars in the reserved spot for EVs are called gas holes.
Okay, thank you. There was a question, but which you answered already, Harriet, but it was by Anne. There seems to be talk about that EVs can't drive on gravel. I wonder if Tom or Roger, do you have anything about that? There seems to be a myth out there that EVs don't drive very well on gravel.
Well, they've got traction control systems just like any car. Certainly, they have a tremendous amount of torque and pickup, and if you pressed your accelerator too fast to take off, certainly your wheels could spin in the gravel, maybe more easily than a gas car. But I think if people just start off slowly and sensibly in gravel, it shouldn't make any difference. I haven't heard of it that being a big issue.
Drive carefully, particularly in snow, I guess. Somebody asked, and that wasn't really covered in the video, what's the cost of used EVs? Do you have any idea about that?
I think it was about $10,000 less than a new Volt. 10 or maybe $10,000 or $12,000. There is Plug and Drive or EVNet has a subsidy program, and you have to watch that video to qualify. But they have a $1,000 rebate or credit towards a used EV. Also, if you're trading in a gas car that's past its prime, there's an organization called Car Heaven, which will take your car away, and you get another $1,000. So there is some incentive, and it's still in place. I had my daughter check with the Plug and Drive people, and they're still open. That when that video was taken, it was when everything was shut down from COVID. So, but they are open, and they will put you in touch with Auto Trader or Kijiji Auto, and there's a couple of other websites where there's used EVs for sale. One of the things they recommend before you buy anything that you get the battery checked out to make sure that it hasn't degraded very much. That's a key thing. If a car has been supercharged beyond 80%, a whole lot of the time, the battery is likely going to be a little bit more degraded. People that just charge at home or use level 1 and 2 will have less degradation on their battery. But I think gas cars over a period of time, they don't get as good mileage either. So it's probably a similar reduction.
So one question that Roger touched on just a little bit is kind of the issue on mining lithium, the impacts of that, particularly for the batteries. There are political issues around that and ethical issues. and environmental issues. I'm not sure, Roger, do you want to, or Tom, do you want to comment on that question?
But of course, we have to be careful about mining lithium and the effects on the environmental effects and the social effects of that. But I don't have any, I can't speak to it with any expertise.
Recycling comes into it. There's a new lithium processing plant being built over in Germany next door to the Eevee plant. And they are going to use 50% of the lithium is going to be recycled. So, and I don't think fossil fuels really get recycled. So
yeah, some of the companies are really pushing now for ethical lithium. And maybe that's one thing to research when we are interested in electric cars. Like what are the policies of the car companies where we buy a car from? I think BMW in Germany kind of has policies around it, and probably others too. One question, I'm not sure if you can answer it, but it's more kind of a general forum question, is public policy around public transportation or electric cars. Like what should be more emphasized, more public transportation or EVs, which is individual transportation. And I know, Roger, you touched on that in one of your slides, where it compared the embodied energy and things like that. I'm not sure if you want to comment more on that. I know it's a very big issue, right? It's not
well,
just
when I lived in downtown Toronto and commuted north to work, can't remember how many kilometers. It took me about 35 minutes to bike. I could have gone in my EV, but I went in my bike because the bike's a lot cleaner, as well as doesn't cause congestion. It's a good workout, et cetera, et cetera. So in an urban environment, an EV is not the best way to get around. Walk, take a bike, take public transportation. An EV is still a huge machine used to transport generally one person.
Oh yeah, somebody asked me about batteries. My grandson did a paper recently on solid state batteries. It is my limited understanding that there is less fire hazard for these. Is this true? And what work is being done to research and or use these in EVs? Because these are basically the batteries that we used in the past. Do you know anything about that technology?
Yeah, not much, except that it is there's less fire hazard, and the goal is, and all the battery, and there's of course all sorts of developments happening on battery now. The goal is higher energy density, lower cost, better safety, and so there's a global commercial competition to improve batteries. That's about as much as I can say.
Okay. I think we got all the questions answered. Thank you so much.
I just have one other comment, Joachim.
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, one of the slides in the video that was referred to was that people felt that EVs were too expensive. And yes, they are more expensive than a comparable gas car. However, the total cost of ownership after 3 or 4 or 5 years, because gasoline, the fuel is so much cheaper and the maintenance is cheaper, the total cost of ownership actually becomes very competitive. So while the initial hit seems like a lot, I think over a period of time, the technology and the battery quality has and the prices have come down, and the price of fuel of fossil fuels seems to be it's fluctuating right now. It's fairly high. In that video, when it was at the start of the pandemic, people were driving and the fuel prices were lower, but she mentioned that. But the cost of ownership is a big thing to consider. So it almost becomes like an investment rather than a big cost. The other thing that's hopeful, there's been quite a few news articles on the CBC and in the Globe that the federal government is going to increase the subsidies. There's currently a $5,000 subsidy if your car is $45,000 or less. And then if there's upgrades to 55,000, it still qualifies. So a number of these vehicles still do qualify for the federal incentive. If you live in Quebec, you get an extra 8%. And if you live in BC, you get an extra 5% above that. So, but in Ontario, Doug Ford canceled all the incentives. He didn't even lower them, which would have probably been more economical and without taking it away. Now, the federal government is in the process of looking at raising the ceiling, and they're probably going to raise it. They're talking about raising it high enough so that it covers some of these basic pickup trucks that are coming on the market, and also most of the bigger SUVs. So if that's the case and they use some of their funds for that, then that will be good. And Joe Biden is and the Democrats are doing a bit of a favor south of the border, because they're offering huge rebates to people if they buy EVs, as long as they're made in the States. So, but the amount of his rebates are really quite high, and he's talking about a minimum of $7,500, even if the EV is made anywhere. So $7,500 US is 10,000 Canadian. So if our federal government increases the subsidy, and it looks like they're talking quite seriously about it, because they want to negotiate with the Americans, and they also want to reduce our emissions. So hopefully it will bring that level up so that it makes EVs much more affordable for everybody.
Okay, there are some practical questions. How often do EVs have to be serviced, and where do they get serviced? Or what happens when it breaks down on the way?
Hello? Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, can I say something on service?
Yeah.
Sure. If you can
Yeah.
do it.
Well, I'm the other half of Harriet. So we share, at the moment, we share the, and I've talked to Tom a couple of times on the road, bumped into him at the store, but yeah, I'd like to answer a bit on service. We've had ours 2 years, and there's basically no service. I mean, they say, okay, bring it back once a year, and they'll check the, go through the software, see if there's any updates on the software, but of course that don't even apply to Tesla people, because it's automatically updated while you're asleep. You wake up in the morning and there it is, it's been updated, everything's done. So for service, there's nothing. We take ours back once a year just to keep it in warranty, just in case. And the last service we've had done, we had to take it to down to Orangeville, because that's our nearest Kia guy. And it was $69, nothing found. So like for 2 years, we've spent probably $120 or $130. And it's just perfect. I mean, I've had cars for all my life. I'm 84. I was on the road for a living. I used to change my cars every 2 years, the gas cars. And I'll tell you, I never want to see another gas car. I got an electric car, another electric car on order. And for me, there'll never be another gas car. It's the way to go.
Yes, and you don't need oil changes, do you? I guess the only thing that needs to be services are the brakes.
And the brakes very little, because most of the braking I do is using the regenerative system. It only hits the friction brakes in emergencies, basically. And so, you know, the regenerative braking is just running the motor backward and putting energy back in the battery. So
I heard you have to rotate the tires. You have to rotate the tires.
Yeah, you have to rotate the tires. You have to change the windshield wiper blades, you know. So, but yeah,
So
it's very much lower.
Another question came up: if it's true that you can't tow with electric vehicles.
Can you tow? Yes, you can tow.
Yeah.
Tesla, the small Model 3, you can tow 4,000 pounds, but you know, obviously it's going to affect the battery life quite a bit. But the bigger Teslas now, like with their trucks, are going to be 7,000 and 10,000 that you can tow. So yes, it's coming.
Yeah, there's
You're muted, Roger. You're muted.
Yeah, I see no issue with towing. And all the pickup trucks will have to have towing capabilities.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. That was really great. Getting such a kind of an in-depth view and dive into electric vehicles. I don't think there's any more questions, but I'm sure if somebody wants to contact you, we can make this possible. But I don't think there are many questions, actually. It's such a straightforward issue. So I just want to hand it over now to Lee again to make some announcements.
Yeah,
Lee?
thanks, Joachim. I want to thank all the presenters. I also want to thank Harriet, Nixon, and Roy. That's good to have extra voices in the conversation tonight. I have tons of questions still, and I have questions about all sorts of things, but I've been I know Tom and Roger myself. I'm gonna talk to them at the coffee shop about things like automation and all-wheel drive and all that. But it's been really great getting this much, and I turn into a pumpkin after 90 minutes on these calls. So yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me, Joachim, was the graph that showed the embodied energy that Roger showed at the end of all the different modes of transportation. And Vivian in the chat, she really, it looked like she was trying to figure out what to advocate for. And I know everyone in our climate action groups, they all want to advocate, they want to make change, right? They want to advocate for the right things. So I'm glad you compared public transport there to cycling. Obviously in rural areas, cycling and public transportation have its challenges. So we're all have unique challenges. And I think there is really a role for EVs for exactly that reason. Not everyone can bike and not everyone can take public transport. So EVs are necessary, absolutely, in a transition to renewable energy and green economy. So yeah, it's been really great to learn. I've learned a lot. Before Joachim concludes, I just wanted to give a plug for our next third Thursday, and that's on January 20th. So you can still RSVP at the same spot. It's graybruceclimateaction.ca, and you click about us. But the group that, the nonprofit that supports Climate Forum, Grey Bruce Sustainability Network, has changed its name today and their branding. So keep an eye open this week. You can hear a lot about the Sustainability Project, and you might hear about it on social media or even in the newspapers. We're really excited to provide an opportunity for everyone to work on projects that change Grey Bruce for the better and give us a brighter future for the next generation. So again, our nonprofit that helps out Climate Forum is the Sustainability Project now. And the Sustainability Project, is the website is thesustainabilityproject.ca. So yeah, maybe I'll see you guys on January 30th. Joachim, floor is yours.
Okay, you could hear the excitement in Lee's voice about the sustainability project. As Lee has mentioned, our next climate forum will be January 20th, and it'll be about fair financing. That question came up a lot. Like, how do we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and our footprint in terms of our financial investments, which could have great impacts on environment and on the climate. And it's often difficult to understand how our investments are actually really invested in or not invested in fossil fuel. So that'll be a really exciting one. So that's on January the 20th on fair financing, and we are finding some great speakers on that one. So thanks again to Tom and Roger. It was a great presentation. Yeah, I think it was a quite a rounded conversation and actually networking today. Thanks so much. Thanks everybody, and have a wonderful winter with whatever car you drive, and see you next year. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.